Welcome to the Water Trough, where we can't make you drink, but we will make you think. My name is Ed Drozd, the Small Business Doctor, and I'm really excited you chose to join me here as we discuss topics that are important for small business folks just like you. If you're looking for ideas, inspiration, and possibility, you've come to the right place. Join us as we take steps to help you create the healthy business that you've always wanted. Hello, folks. This is Ed Drozd, the Small Business Doctor, and I want to welcome you back to the Water Trough. Today, I am joined by my friend Mike Halperin. Mike has approximately 40 years of expertise in the field of collaboration. He's worked both inside and outside of organizations, including large corporations, small business, nonprofits, Fortune 500s, and government agencies as well. And today, we're going to talk about the value of collaboration, how it's important to us, and probably some things that you probably never thought about before as well. So Mike Halperin, welcome. How are you today?
I am doing very well, and I want to thank you for inviting me to your podcast. Actually, I'm very excited to talk about collaboration because, as you know, it's been something that's been a particular interest of mine for a long time. So I'm very happy to be here with you and your guests.
I appreciate having you here, Mike. And when it comes to collaboration, we might all think we know what we're talking about, but tell us more about collaboration. Why is it so important?
Well, my experience is that you can't get anything done in organizations, large or small. And I think what happens is a lot of times people think they know what it is, and they really don't. It's something that we've been doing almost from the time that we were born. If you ever watch little kids, they know how to do it, especially as, they're twins, and it's just adorable to watch them. And there's something about how we can forget that as we get older, as we get into schools. There's such an emphasis put on independence and being able to do excellent work by yourself that I think kids, then young adults, and then adults in the workplace forget what it is. And it's really critically important because my experience has been, if you're doing collaboration well, whether it's one-on-one with somebody or in teams, the sum is greater than the outcome, rather, is greater than the sum of the parts. 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. 2 plus 2 equals 5 or more if there's effective collaboration. So for me, it's really, really important. It's that additional piece that you get really speaks to the why people ought to be looking at what it is to them, what they need to learn to be able to collaborate more effectively, and to be able to talk openly about where it's working and where it's not working.
And you should think it'd be pretty obvious to us that collaboration is important. You should think that we'd be aware that there's much to be said for, as you say, the 1 plus 1 is not 2. 1 plus 1 is far more. And yet, companies go out of their way to even include it in their mission statement. We're going to develop teams, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But when it comes to implementing these things, it's not all that easy. What's going on here?
Well, I think I have a few ideas, Ed, on what that could be. One is, when you look at mission statements, they represent what I'll refer to as espoused values. This is what companies believe they stand for, as opposed to values in action, which are the kind of hidden ones that we oftentimes know that they're there. We'll talk about it to our friends, but we don't discuss gaps to upper management, if there is one, between what they're saying the values are and what's really rewarded within the organization. So let me give you an example. And you probably know about this. 20 years ago, there was a lot of literature on creating the learning organization. So a lot of organizations were really espousing values of learning, which in fact gets done through collaboration. The problem was not what they were espousing. The problem was what happened the first time somebody made a mistake. And what happens is most people have in their head a measurement system. So they'll say, well, if it's a little tiny error, and I'm motioning to you visually, Ed, which unfortunately your listeners can't see, if it's a little tiny error, they'll let it go. And they won't talk about it necessarily until the next time when the error gets a little bit bigger, and then they're scratching their head and thinking, I think Mike gets it, but we'll try one more loop. And by that time, the error is out there. Mike gets whacked for making that error. Sometimes it's a public feedback around that as a way of not only putting Mike in his place, but everyone else is now on record around what's really important here is getting it right. So the espoused value of collaboration is not what's getting recognized or rewarded. It's this hidden measurement system. Everybody's got one. They may not be aware of it. And that's part of our blind spot, which is what's important and what's not important. What do we measure people on? What do we hold them accountable to? And if we're going to create a culture that supports collaboration, then we've got to be clear about what are the systems that we have in place. And I don't care if it's a company of 5 people or 5,000 or 50,000 people, everybody's got this stuff going on in their head that can get in the way of collaboration.
So I'm hearing a couple things here. And one is that it sounds like collaboration is something that is expected or dictated from the top. But what really is going on is collaboration has nothing to do with them. It's what we at the shop level, for example, are doing. Is that correct?
I think it's both. Honestly, I really, really do. I mean, there is an expectation that, let's suppose you and I are on the same team on a manufacturing floor and we're assembling something together. And that you and I may have a delineated task. Maybe you do the first part, you hand it over to me, I do the other. We're working well until the foreman comes in and says, what the hell's going on here? Why, where's the breakdown? All of a sudden, that kind of feedback is one where people get defensive. It's not one about learning. It's around I'm not going to get blamed for it. I'm not going to own this when in fact it was part of the entire system. So if the system is one of making sure that the whole unit is successful, then we've got to create mechanisms that allows people to learn. Then it would allow us to own it, and then it would allow us to go on and get to the next step, continuous improvement. But if in fact the system is, who made this screw up? Was it Ed Drozda and Mike Halperin? Hey, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And I may not say that publicly to my boss, but I'll have the private conversations and say it was Ed. And then you'd be doing the same thing if that's how we're being held responsible in the organization. So that has to be fixed, I think.
So this is all about the manner in which the organization incorporates collaboration, the manner in which they set out their expectations, what it looks like.
I think that's true. And if I've not stated it clearly, I think everyone sits in the organization. People don't really know what collaboration is. They don't take the time to slow down enough to figure it out. Take it at a team level, the shop level, for example. To me, a foreman or four-person who was good at what they were doing would have a meeting with their team and talk about what are the expectations? What does good work look like? How do we help each other? What does support look like? When do I jump in and help somebody else who's backed up? When do we work together on a task? When do we make sure the handoffs between me and you, Ed, in the example I gave earlier, are done? How do we make sure the baton doesn't fall? Who picks up the baton? How do we tell our boss that we dropped the baton, so to speak? How do we not get nailed for that, but rather say, how do we make sure the handoff is smoother going on? And now that's at that level, but the same thing is happening up above, because a lot of times people assume by the time you get to be a mid-level manager, an executive, one of the C-suite, or in a small business, one of the owners, for example, it's hard to talk to them. One of the difficult to discuss issues is the fact that they may not be doing what they espouse. They say we want collaboration, but they don't see that they're not producing collaboration, which can be very difficult to talk about unless it's done openly with invitation and with respect.
So if my senior folks are not walking the talk, it's difficult for me to either believe that it's necessary or to even do it, because for the reasons you've described. For example, the foreperson comes along and starts yelling at me because things didn't work out, which kind of flies in the face of collaboration, because I'm making every effort to work with someone to get things done, including that foreperson. It sounds like the process of implementing is not that straightforward. There's a lot of preparation that has to go into this to make it effective.
I think so, because it's one of those words that most people think they know what it is, because at some level, go back to what I said earlier, most kids learn to do some version of that very early on, but they unlearn and they forget what they've learned. So, and it's also, collaboration is okay until it's not. So if it's going to work, then what we do is we talk about, what does it mean to us? What are the examples of good collaboration? What do we do if we notice that we're not doing that well? How do we make that discussable with whoever that we're interacting with? So it doesn't get to the point where, if there's a gap, and I guarantee you there will be, it's not about nailing people at the gap. It's saying, how do we talk about it when it happens and get better? It's not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It said, okay, we were able to do this. This is where it fell apart. And it's not about pointing blame. It's about creating ownership and mutual responsibility to be able to do it well and skillfully. And I underscore that word skillfully, is because I think, like any other human skill, a lot of people take those things for granted. And I believe that this is something that needs to be looked at, understood, develop skills around, practice, get feedback, so people become more second nature with it. It's like riding a bike. You're going to fall off, but what do? You get back on the bike, you try it again. And it's like training wheels. The problem is, when we get to be older, people think that they've learned what they need to learn, and consequently, what's harder than learning is unlearning. We've learned a lot of very bad practices that we think have served us well, and they are embedded blindly for most people in what they do. And that unlearning oftentimes creates opportunities for being able to relearn what it takes to be able to collaborate effectively.
So are you suggesting, is it possible that as we get older, collaboration becomes more difficult?
Yes, I'll extend it to say everything becomes more difficult, because
Well,
we've lost.
okay,
I'm
fine.
not just,
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay.
and I'm not just talking about our knees, Ed, or things along that line. I'm talking about, we've learned a whole set of practices over the years that are based on assumptions that at some level have served us well, because if they haven't served us well, we're likely to let go of them. The problem is, we're blind to where it isn't working, because a lot of times people won't tell senior management what they need to be doing, out of a whole list of things, including fear of consequences, negative consequences, if they open up and tell the truth. So what happens is, most employees have learned to tell management this much of the truth, a small amount, but not give them the whole picture, which would help them gauge how well they're setting the culture to support collaboration or not. I think that's one of the challenges that I've seen in almost every organization. And it takes a relatively rare leader to be able to accept an invitation to hear not just the good, but also the bad and the ugly. Because only then, if they're able to grow, then the rest of the organization will grow as well.
Right. So collaboration, I think in its very basic form, we would say that it's working with someone to accomplish something, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And yet, at the same time, is it not working for or on behalf of someone or something? So with the idea that you and I will work together to get this done, working for on behalf of this organization, for example, or this boss, this leader, I think is collaboration at a different level. What do you think?
That's a really great question, because what you're saying, if I'm hearing the question right, is at some level, most people assume it to be obvious. So you and I are collaborating on this podcast, for example.
Yes.
And so you and I have had some conversation about what this conversation may look like, but I'm following your lead on this. So at some level, it's obvious. We have a podcast, you're interviewing me, I'm giving you my thoughts about what it is. It happens that you and I are pretty aligned because we've worked together in the past. We know where we're coming from. We have similar values around this kind of work. So therefore, if you and I took a shortcut here or there, that's okay, because we have enough of a history that would allow us to make positive meaning out of where the person is going.
Mhm.
Now let's back it up a moment. Let's put two people in a team that are working on the same task who've not worked together. Then maybe they've done the same job in another organization. They don't know how it works here. They don't know about, how is leadership manifested in this company. They don't know about the informal leadership. Where's the real power? Who influences whom? What is on the table? What's off the table? What are the challenges the organization's had to deal with? So consequently, unless individuals slow down a notch to figure that out around, what does collaboration mean to me? What do I want out of it? What does it mean to you? What is your goal? And how do they work together? And can we serve a broader goal, which in this case is hopefully giving the listener a useful conversation to step back and reflect on? That to me is the broader goal that you and I both ascribe to, which is why I think we're able to do this, the back and forth that we are. If we did not have that basis said, this could be going every which way and in providing, worst case, no value to anybody.
We certainly aren't going to be delivering such a package as that. We know we're going to do far better.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, something that you mentioned, which really I think this is important. When I speak about the collaboration being something on behalf of, I'm trying to extend my role as a participant to the larger organization and say that what I'm doing not only serves in the instant sense, but to everybody else there, whether I'm working with them directly or not. And you commented that leaders may sometimes shy away from this collaboration thing. And I'm curious about that. If I'm working on behalf of the organization, I'm working on behalf of those leaders as well. I'm trying to support them, not working directly with them, but on behalf of them. But why do you think they might be shying away? Is it a sign of weakness? Is it a sign of acquiescence? Why should a leader find collaboration to be perhaps a negative thing? What do you think?
I think there are a couple answers to that, Ed. I'll start with first level supervisors. Oftentimes organizations will promote from within. So you go back to the shop model that you were talking about before. What they'll do oftentimes is promote the best person on the floor. So, okay, you're now a supervisor. They may or may not, most often cases, have not gotten formalized training on what does it take to be a foreman or a supervisor or a leader. Now, all of a sudden, people that were their friends before, they're now supervising. Old model, but I think it still applies to a great extent. One of the hardest transitions in every organization I've seen, and I've been doing management development, leadership development for most of my career, is people will raise that issue of managing former peers. And one of the ways that they do it, mostly unknowingly, somewhat knowingly, is I have to show them that I deserve this job. Therefore, I have to look like a leader, whatever that means to people. So I can't take pushback from them. If I tell them that they need to do something, they need to do it. I have to show them I'm in charge. So there's something about the fact that they make a leap from being an individual contributor to a supervisor, but there's been no discussion in any strategic way for most people around what the challenge means. How do we reset expectations around what my role is? How can I still be collaborative, but at the same time be your boss? And that's a tough one. It's a really tough one. And I've known a lot of people who have suffered in that role because they've not been able to make that transition. The other thing that I've seen is that kind of thing cascades up the organization. So take it up to the level of a chief operating officer as they move into CEO. They may be terrific at running the operations, but they don't necessarily know what it's like to be a chief executive officer, and the roles are different. They should be different. And I've also seen organizations where the skills of the CEO were more operational and the COO was better at big question things. So they kept the titles, but they reversed their roles, partly out of their comfort zone. So I think part of it is a function of training. Part of it is assumption around the assumptions that people make about what that role is, and a desire for some people to make sure that they see I'm in charge. Being in charge can run counter to collaboration. And it takes, I think, a special leader to be able to say, here are the situations that I think we can collaborate. But if there's a legitimate fire, and I'm putting quotation marks around the word fire, a real emergency, there are going to be times as a leader, I'm going to have to tell you, I know we usually sit down and talk this thing through. I need you to do it this way, and here's why.
And absolutely, any of these things is situational. I have to be able to respond accordingly at the time. I think it's in an organization, again, the goal is greater than any one person. That is to say, everybody is striving to achieve a uniform goal or set of goals. Now, everybody has their own part to play. I do my thing, you do your thing, and so on and so forth. But no matter where you are in that organization, you depend upon those other folks. You're sitting in the owner's seat, or you're a CEO, COO, or whatever the case might be. And if you neglect the people that are on the shop floor getting the job done, you are not going to succeed. I think it's fair to say collaboration in some form is necessary. If collaboration is nothing more than simply accepting the importance of other people, maybe that's all it is, the higher up you go. What do you think?
Well, it's an interesting base. Even if the senior leaders don't really believe in the importance of collaboration, they have to at least recognize that there are plenty of people around who will. And I have a very strong belief, and I've seen this, that the extent to which organizations are not seen as genuinely respectful, genuinely collaborative, allowing for differences of opinion, all kinds of backgrounds, and so on and so forth. And the organization doesn't support that, you're going to see an impact on their ability to recruit, their ability to retain and engage good employees. They're going to look for places that are better for them than the one that they have. There's a lot of research that says that, and this goes back, Gallup has been doing this study for about 25, 30 years. The primary reason people leave organizations, and sure, everybody wants more money and more time off and so forth, but the number one reason that they'll cite is their supervisors and what they do or don't do to create an engaging environment, which is about collaboration. People want to feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that people are being listened to and respected. And people will put up with slight here or there, but if that's the pattern, they're going to walk away. So what happens is, unless people feel part of something bigger than themselves, they have an incentive to look elsewhere. And I don't care if it's a mom and pop store that we're talking about, Ed, or a Fortune 100 company that has 100,000 employees or everything in between. People basically want the same stuff. They want to feel part of something. And I think that is the responsibility of the companies that we work with.
So collaboration feeds our value, our perceived value.
I genuinely believe that.
Okay.
And if there's a way to make people legitimately engaged, people are not looking for just have me engage me, and then you go off privately behind the closed door to make a decision. People want to feel it's genuine because I know my job. I know what's going on. I have my hands on where the problems are. I can come up with some ideas, and that you're genuinely open to listening. And if what I'm suggesting makes sense, maybe implementing what I say. Collaboration is different than compromise, because a lot of people think it's the same thing. You could have 5 people who are working on a team, they compromise, they split the difference. And the interesting thing about compromise is that depending on how you look at it, you could look at it as we all lost. That's the most negative view of compromise. I didn't get what I wanted. I wanted $1 raise. They gave me 50 cents raise. I didn't get what I want, so I'm annoyed. It's like a union bargaining kind of position. If you look at it from the other side, which is management says, we gave him 50 cents, we lost. We didn't want to give him that. I want to give him 25 cents. But what the thing about compromise is, depending on who you are and what side you started on, you could see it as a win, you could see it as a loss, or you could see a little bit of both. Collaboration, on the other hand, is you genuinely are connecting with people in a way that you're doing problem solving. You're inviting the people who are closest to the issues to participate in thinking through what the problem is and what are the ways to deal with it. Not only do people feel better, you're going to come up with better solutions and more lasting solutions through collaboration. And if things change 5 years from now, because what's going on in the environment is different, what's going on with the economy has changed, what have you, and the solution that we agreed was right for 2022, 5 years in 2027, we may have to go back and take a look at it and then do incremental tweaks between now and 2027.
So compromise almost becomes like a smokescreen. If I don't feel I can effectively collaborate, I'll throw up compromise. It acts from the failure to be able to collaborate.
It could, especially if people give up too soon, which is what happens is that people get impatient with process. So what they'll do is they'll gravitate to either compromise, which doesn't take a lot of time. You say 100, I say 0. How long does it take to compromise? 50. 50 is the price you and I shake hands and we're done with it. Where we have to deal with the consequences of compromise is if we thought we could have done better and we didn't try, that's going to be with us for a long time. And what we've now done is sown more discontent and probably more distrust when we could have perhaps stayed with it a little bit longer, come up with a solution that would have worked better. Now, I don't want to pretend that there are going to be situations that can easily, sometimes compromise might be the best, and we have to at least collaborate on making the choice of how we're going to make the decision, at least talk about it, so to speak. For me, that's better than saying I'm the boss and this is my way or the highway. Now, except in an emergency, if there's a genuine emergency, that makes a lot of sense to me. But the problem with that is if you have somebody who's highly directive, you'll have people who by their very personality are either going to be conflict avoidant or accommodating, and that the highly directive boss is going to say, see, I was right in telling them that we need to do this course of action because they didn't give me any counter argument. So it becomes a self-fulfilling system. I say we do X, they back down because I'm the boss. And then what happens, they go out afterwards, they pull their friends aside and said, my God, can you believe what that Ed Drozda did in that meeting? I can't believe the decision he made.
I will tell you one thing, and I can say this from experience. In a situation where boss chooses to collaborate, rest assured, I have always been ready to jump when told when the level of acuity rises. I've also been in the situation where there was no collaboration and your senses are dulled. And even in the midst of a highly acute situation, that command is not interpreted in the same way. So I think the collaboration has far-reaching impacts well beyond the instant moment. It's almost like a trust that's established.
Exactly.
And when you bark at me and say, hey, now, boom, then I'm going to boom right there because we have that understanding, that collaboration is ours. Do you have any parting comments you want to leave us with? Anything that you think we really need to close us out with?
The first thing I would say is underlying the whole conversation are the assumptions that we all make about what we think collaboration is, what we think we should do or not do, and where it will work and where it won't work. And even the example that you just gave is if you have the ability to at least check those assumptions, say, why do I believe I can't ask these people to help me solve this problem? What is it in my head? Start with myself, the leader, that says I can't do it. And then be willing to give it a shot. That's first thing. Second thing is, if you've not done a lot of collaboration, don't start with the biggest project on your mind because it's a setup. So what we do is we may take some small steps and we learn incrementally about what we need to do better that we can then expand over time. It's about expanding the comfort zone gradually and incrementally so that if we're doing this thing right, we don't have to tell them everything to do. The team can begin to self-manage at some level because they got it. They've bought the assumption that they trust us enough to let us collaborate to figure out what needs to be done, that we'll raise problems to them, and hopefully they will support us in our analysis, because that's what they've been showing us they're going to do. And the third thing I will say has to do with learning and unlearning. Unlearning is a lot harder than learning, that these patterns are deeply held for a long time. Some of them formed when we were kids, teachers telling us what we have to know and what we can't know, what's right, what's wrong. You've seen the commercial of one of the sports cars about 5-6 years ago. They showed this kid who was drawing the pictures, and then he was going outside the dots, and then there was a big fast sports car that went blasting off the screen. That's what we have to relearn, the ability to be creative, to enjoy it, to enjoy interacting with people, to let it go where it's going to go. Because if we trust enough in that, we'll get the answer that we need.
Mike, I have to say, once again, I so appreciate having you here. This has been absolutely fantastic.
My pleasure, Ed. This was fun. I appreciated it. So
well, I look forward to the opportunity to do this again. And folks, I want to once again thank my guest, Mike Halperin, our collaboration expert. And I want to invite you all to take this information with you, to give it consideration, hopefully to be able to apply it in a fashion that is useful for you. And until we meet again, this is Ed Drozda, the Small Business Doctor, and I wish you a healthy business. Thank you.